doing a little bit of work on the African Americans in Life-Saving Service exhibit. This week it's kind of interesting. One of the characters we feature is Willis Augustus Hodges, and the drawing we have of him dates from around the 1870s. Willis Hodges was actually from the Kempsville area. Historically, we remember him in the museum as the first African American Lighthouse Keeper, which he was, and that actually happened in the spring of 1870, where he was a temporary keeper at the Cape Henry Light. That, of course, is what we would call the old Cape Henry Light. The new one hasn't been built yet. But he actually becomes the first African American lighthouse keeper, and he serves at Cape Henry there from May all the way through the summer of 1870. And Hodges, like many of the African Americans that served along the coast, came from the Kempsville area in Princess Anne County. And Hodges, we know, actually was an abolitionist in the antebellum period, and a fairly important figure in Virginia politics before the Civil War. And we know he actually assisted with the Underground Railroad during the war. And after the war, in the years of Reconstruction, Hodges actually represented Princess Anne County at the Virginia Constitutional Convention. That's 1867. In 67 and 68, he's one of the lead figures from Virginia that's representing the state. This is the first time blacks and whites sit down together as lawmakers. Really a crucial period. And that was, besides Hodges' place in history as a lighthouse keeper, he's on those first committees where whites and blacks are sitting down together and making laws. 1867. Now, it's kind of interesting. A lot of people talk about the first African American life-saving crew. And historically, a lot of times, that's remembered as a crew from Pea Island in North Carolina. And we have lots of that history. What's often not told is the crew that served 5 years before in the little life-saving station right at Cape Henry. Again, Cape Henry history. This is actually in 1875, it started the storm season, it started in March, that Cape Henry had the first African American life-saving crew. Now, the distinction, the reason they don't make it into the first all African American crew is because they had a white boss. The keeper was white. And the black crew was actually put together and replaced the white crew that essentially had been fired because they were doing such a terrible job. So in the storm season of 1875, this African American crew serves as the first under a white keeper, and they went through a number of shipwrecks and served all the way through. We see records of them in 75 and 1876. We think also by some of the records that there may have been a crew also in 1877. Can't quite nail that down 100%. Another interesting thing about the life-saving service is that the crew of the life-saving were all paid about $40 a month. And the African American crew and the white crew made the same money. There was no distinction. You made $40 a month in the United States Life-Saving Service. It's kind of ahead of its time in the Reconstruction period. And we see by the pay records and some of the archival pieces that we have that the crews are making the same amount of money as their white counterparts. And this is really, and $40 a month, by the way, was pretty decent money for the time. Say someone in a lumber mill or powder mill still might be making $1 a day. They might be making $30 a month. The $40 a month was actually pretty decent pay for that part in the century. So historically, here's your first African American crew, and it happened right at Cape Henry. What's always remembered is that Pea Island crew, and that's in 1880. It comes 5 years after with Richard Etheridge as the keeper, And that distinction, the first all African American crew, is at Pea Island in 1880. The Coast Guard even named the vessel after Keeper Etheridge. But what's often lost in history is this African American crew that served 5 years before, right at our own Cape Henry.